Ladies and gentlemen, members of this august house, this debate is about the push for change, the pursuit to end conflict. What do we do, right? Under our paradigm, ladies and gentlemen, we think that that's the aim of sanctions, right? To at least put a stop to the sort of conflict that happens before you can push for the sort of change. If you listen to side government, they want constructive engagement for democracy. They want constructive engagement to provide them with negotiation, peacekeeping, power sharing, so on. I'll tell you why that's flawed and why that'll never happen, right? But if you listen to Team's speech, Team gave you 5 analyses, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of them new, right? For instance, the whole nuance of the Arab League and the nature of the division of the Arab League. The very fact of the matter that the ideology is so different, ladies and gentlemen, to get them to want to come to a consensus, especially when it comes to instilling democracy, we don't think that that's going to happen in this circumstance. He also talked to you about why sanctions don't work. He talked to you about Syria and how, the sort of nature of Syria, the kind of situation that Syria is at. Finally, he talked to you about the nature of this dictatorship, something I'll also explain in my rebuttals. And third, and fifth, and more importantly, he talked to you about constructive engagement in the form of post-war reconstruction, don't bother standing up. Let's look at the things that they talked about, right? Democracy, ladies and gentlemen, is not just about elections, right? It's not just about sustaining democracy on an empty stomach, whereby we just put in an election or put in a negotiation process just for the sake of doing it, right? Because the fact of the matter is, the Arab world and the Arab League is so divided, ladies and gentlemen, that constructive engagement in that aspect won't work, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that sustaining democracy on an empty stomach under this paradigm will help at all, because the situation of Syria is, the gravity, right, is quite bad, right? Which moves me on to my first idea, Bashar al-Assad. I'll get your POIs later, right? I'll do it for you. Let's look at the first thing, right? Bashar al-Assad, and what appeals to Bashar al-Assad. Because their side, their paradigm will only exist, and it's only predicated on the assumption that Bashar al-Assad will take it, right? They want to offer amnesty. Tim showed you, and he told you why people will only take the amnesty when they're ending twilight, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because they don't want to get caught in this circumstance. But if you look in terms of Syria, the situation in Syria, he's at his prime. He's oppressing, he's murdering people, ladies and gentlemen. He has military might under that circumstance. That's his prime in that aspect. Sit down. There's no impetus for him to want to take on this amnesty, ladies and gentlemen. If you look at Gaddafi, he would have rather died on battle because there's more pride than taking the top up, ladies and gentlemen. Despite the uprising, it pushes Bashar al-Assad to be more creative to how else to kill, or how else to maintain the foothold of power. Sit down. The idea of sanctions and how it doesn't work, right? Because the fact of the matter is, no man's an island and no country can continue to subsist on its own, ladies and gentlemen. Bashar al-Assad and Syria needs the support of the region, ladies and gentlemen, because the support within that region has always backed him. This means sit, honey. The sort of support in the region, ladies and gentlemen, this is the region that either always backed him or never said anything against him, ladies and gentlemen. That's the kind of constructive engagement that happened under their paradigm. Sit down. Let's look in terms of the resources, because Tim told you a lot about how this weakens the government, right? Things like providing them with a solid, continued economic trade, and even trade in terms of weaponry and military, ladies and gentlemen. Just an economic trade continue to fund the sort of military to go against the very people. Sit down. This is a dictator who has foothold of power, ladies and gentlemen. He's moved to the extreme of radicalism, ladies and gentlemen. Right? He's even attacked Libyans because he feared the spill of the sort of uprising there, ladies and gentlemen. It's a man who doesn't believe in democracy. We don't think that offering him the olive branch over and over again, taking your time in this circumstance, is what's in the best interest there, right? If sanctions have not worked, why have you offered it as your last resort? Never really engaged with under their paradigm, right? That's also it. We understand, ladies and gentlemen, and recognize that in terms of economic sanctions, it does affect people. But the fact of the matter is, we agree, but there has to be a trade-off, right? Because time sensitivity is most crucial in this circumstance. We stop the supply, we stop strengthening him, we think that that's what's more important. Let's look at the second idea, right? Sanctions versus engagement. And the idea of engagement, because their engagement and what they want to stand for is only democracy and echoed by the entire bench, ladies and gentlemen. They never prove to you how you can subsist and how you can sustain democracy under that circumstance, ladies and gentlemen. We've shown you that our goal is to stop power before we can move on. Before I continue to analyze this, yes?
Look, Lava, give us a case analysis or a real-life precedent where sanctions has worked in the past.
If you listen to Tim's speech, Tim told you about Haiti 1994, right? Even if you look at terms of King Jong-il, right? And how someone as tyrannical as him fear actions and sanctions by China, right? No man's an island, ladies and gentlemen. No country can continue to subsist in isolation on its own, because you still need to rely on trade, you still need to rely even on military power in the circumstances, ladies and gentlemen. A country even as rogue as Iran or as rogue as North Korea will always continue to need that, right? Your idea of Russia and China is not even going to stand. It was taken down long ago. Don't bother standing up. Let's look at this, right? Can the Arab League do it? Because the government under that their paradigm and this side of the house was to push for democracy, negotiation, peacekeeping, all these fluffy little things never really explained under their paradigm. Right? Because most of these leaders, like we've shown you, laugh at the idea of democracy because they're not fully democratic to begin with, right? That's incoherence within that sense. Sit down, Hafiz. This idea of incoherence, the nature of Arab League. The question is, where then is the impetus for the Arab League on its own to push for democracy under the circumstance? And secondly, can they do it without zero interference? Because the fact of the matter is, they're inexperienced when it comes to instilling democracy under that circumstance. Sit down. Given that incoherence, right, the sort of divide that we have, the monarchies that we have in Saudi Arabia and Morocco, right, the fact that, it's kind of funny when they just talk about Djibouti and Morocco and how they're African states. But even Sudan's an African state. All of these states, ladies and gentlemen, it's not about geographically, but it's also the very fact that the Muslim nations, ladies and gentlemen, falls under the Arab League. Something that shows that they don't have an understanding of what the Arab League even is about. So we don't think that their credibility in this debate even stands. Right? What's needed in a democracy, ladies and gentlemen? Because if you look in terms of the sort of division that already exists, don't bother, honey. It's not a division that already exists, ladies and gentlemen, right? The Arab League has been tested by US-led war against Iraq, right? We've got some members of Arab League backing it, some opposing it, some being staying the sidelines. There's a sort of divide that already exists within the Arab League, ladies and gentlemen, especially with things that are very different in their ideology, very foreign to them, the idea of democracy. We don't think that that exists. Because if you listen to Ari's speech, he showed you there's no uniformity in terms of the societal approach, right? How then will his constructive engagement even work under his paradigm when there's no uniformity that he conformed to, that he considered to under that paradigm, ladies and gentlemen? They assert that everyone wants constructive engagement. Obviously, we want the easy way out. But under the circumstance, it's not working, ladies and gentlemen. We've been tolerating this sort of governments for too long under the pretense of taking the easy way out, under the pretense of taking the cop-out, ladies and gentlemen. We think that that has led us is that we've never been taken seriously. We've never been shown that we have a stance, despite the brutality that's happened under Bashar al-Assad, ladies and gentlemen. I think the time sensitivity of this issue means we cannot wait, right? Because the assumption, ladies and gentlemen, that we will wait and that he will finally take us is far too great or far too serious for us to want